This is On Base, your one-stop shop for solving your most pressing B2B go-to-market challenges. Each week, hosts Chris Moody and Paul Gibson talk to sales and marketing leaders to get you in-depth insights and creative strategies to set your revenue teams up for success.
Hey everyone, welcome back to On Base. I'm your host, Chris Moody. Today, I'm really excited to talk to Joshua Hoffman on leveraging insights to sync sales and marketing. Josh is currently a partner at CH Consulting after he spent the last 3 decades in global leadership roles at companies you all know and love, like Dell, Avaya, Palo Alto Networks, Datto, and Netrix Global. CH Consulting is a team of experts with relevant expertise in sales, marketing transformation, or marketing and transformation. Don't want to conflate the two there, Joshua, and strategy, growth, operational excellence, legal, and more. So very excited to have you. Thanks for joining the show.
Oh, Chris, thanks for having me on. I've been really excited to spend the time with you for all kinds of reasons. One, I love doing these, and hopefully there's a way that I can help others. And two, I love what you and your organization do. And so I think there's a lot of linkage here. And I've been looking forward to spending the time together. Thanks again for having me on.
Awesome. Yeah, we're really glad to have you here. And we talked about alignment. This is a challenge that everyone deals with, trying to better align sales and marketing, how technology plays into that. I'd love to get your rundown of some of the common challenges that you're seeing companies face when they talk about aligning.
It's a great topic to get into. And interestingly enough, I was literally giving this talk to this collective group of people just a few weeks ago about how you create this alignment and create partnership. And that's the word that always jumps out at me, that this is supposed to be a partnership. When sales and marketing get at odds, which happens in a lot of organizations, and gosh knows I've lived through that a bunch, there has to be a way to bring people back to square. And, candidly, I think people get wrapped around too much about who does what, who's wrong, who's not doing a good job, instead of getting into what are the outcomes we need to drive, what are the metrics we're going to focus on, what are we going to do to co-deliver results against those. And that word co is going to show up maybe a lot on this podcast, maybe not, but it shows up a lot in my life. Co-create, co-deliver. You've got to be teammates in this. And if you're not looking at it that way, then you're already off to a really poor start. And so that's typically, where I find people at odds is when people start talking about words like attribution and they say, wait a minute, what's attribution? How do we figure that out? Instead of saying, how are we going to go tackle this together? We've got metrics that we co-own in this. And that's when things start to get really fun.
I love that. Attribution is a trigger word for me. I'm glad that you said that. Let's dive into that, right? I mean, we know we should have a shared version of success. We know we should look at some of the same metrics. We do see lots of folks where marketing may be measured on MQLs or marketing attribution or marketing sourced or marketing contribution. Lots of ways to word that side of the house when sales may be focused on pipeline and closing revenue, right? But what are some of the guiding tips you'd have for what metrics to look at, how we start to align with metrics and get away from the attribution fight?
Yeah, so thanks for bringing that up. So first of all, find common language. And, a lot of times people are using words like MQLs and SQLs and things along those lines. Find the language that's inside of your CRM so that not only is leadership talking at the same level, but the people that are doing the work and spending time with customers, spending time driving demand and leads, everybody's got to have the same language. Once you have the same language, try and find a way to make sure that you have key metrics that you're delivering together and that you're co-creating. And so when I take a look at how things are going, and I do this with the marketing leadership team all the time, whether they've been a part of my team or not, doesn't really matter. It's about trying to find a way to say, all right, what are the different funnels that we're trying to create? How are we going to measure those? How are we going to bring those funnels down into process? And then when something has an opportunity to improve, and by the way, there's always an opportunity for improvement, unless conversion rate's 100%, which clearly it never is, there's always an opportunity to improve. What are we going to do about it? When the conversation starts to drift into, oh, these leads suck, or, hey, you're not closing the leads we're giving you, or you're not converting them, that's when things go sideways. And so saying, let's take a look at this particular funnel. We've got these leads coming in from this source, and here's the current conversion ratio we have from lead accepted to lead working, where there's active dialogue going on. We'd like it to be 25% instead of 15%. What are we going to do about that? And as soon as you get into that we conversation, you realize that there's so much more that can happen. It's not just about whether the sales rep had the right dialogue or whether the BDR made the call. Maybe there's more opportunity to prepare the customer to be spoken to. Maybe there's another piece of Marcom that should go out to that customer before the conversation happens, or maybe there's one that should immediately follow on. And as soon as you get into that creative shared process where you're like standing at the whiteboard together and coming up with brainstorming ideas, things really start to fly at that point. And that's when I get super excited. But it does start with common language, making sure you're in the same system together, make sure you're firing off the right outcomes that you agree on, and then agree on what's the opportunity for improvement. What are we going to do to change it? The other thing that I found really matters is the experiential part of it. And when you get your sales team members to sit with your marketing team members and understand what the process really is, not just, oh, the output is a lead. And when you get your marketing people to sit down with people that are actually driving that dialogue or trying to get the dialogue to take place, could be writing emails, could be getting on the phone, could be answering the phones. There's a lot of empathy that happens, and that empathy goes a long way too.
It's like you read my mind. We just did a messaging training today, and we were talking about our new tone. And one of the key points, there was a whole slide that said empathetic. And we talked about that. And it was channeling the passion that we have to have for what we're doing. And you were hitting on that with collaboration too. I think in many instances, sales and marketing think about working together and they view it as this rigid meeting where we just update each other on what things are going on. And it's not that collaborative effort of saying, how can we blur the lines to get revenue across the finish line, right? Yeah. Like, tell us more about that feeling, because I do think a lot of our listeners may have heard that and taken it for granted a little bit and not really understood what that should and could feel like.
Yeah, look, we're all accountable for pipeline and recognizing that it all has different starting points. But once you've got that starting point delivered, and there's so many that could be sitting out there, again, you could have 15 different funnels that are bringing deals into the system. There's other opportunities to make sure that that pipeline carries to the next stage. And, the A grade example is maybe in your Salesforce system, getting from stage 4 to stage 5 is a challenge. Things start to drop off there. Well, what are we going to do about that? Maybe it's a sales issue. Maybe it's a sales rep issue. It could be a skill issue. There could be a training or enablement issue. But maybe there's an opportunity to take that customer further by delivering them a very specific targeted piece of information at that point that gets them ready or more ready to go to stage 5, and it makes that next dialogue easier. And again, it's that sharing inside of that makes those things happen at a better rate. And there's all of these other tools out there now that can make a difference in this process. Look, what you and your team do with driving customer level analytics into the process, that's a huge differentiator. And the opportunity to use that to expose how you drive the right value proposition, A+, got to go do that. There's all of this AI technology out there. And, candidly, I can probably be better at it, but the use of that as it started to expose itself has driven a much better dialogue and a much better set of outcomes, because there's all this intelligence out there to grab. And if speaking as a sales rep, that's my DNA. If I think that I know everything, which at times I did, then I'm already like sitting behind the 8 ball. I've got to make sure that I'm grabbing every piece of information I can to make that conversation, that dialogue, progress the deal at least one step further.
Great point. I think a lot of folks consider the data and the analytics as only the initial input. And then it's to say, let's prioritize these because we see this data. But could you tell us more about the role that you think the data and the behavioral insights and the analytics should play in improving that process and how we should be using some of that information? Because I do think a lot of teams just see it and say, call this person first, and not necessarily acting differently based on what we can know now.
Yeah, you have a great point that you're making here. And so let me add on to it. So first of all, I'm not a methodology guy. So look, I love Challenger. I love value selling, spin. I love Medic, but really I don't love all of any single one of them. I love pieces of each. And so part of it is making sure that the sales team, the people that are interacting with the customer, have a process. And you have to make sure that the marketing team understands what that process is, so that as you're getting into each one of those steps and stages, everybody has a mission. And that mission sometimes, again, is a shared mission. And so the use of analytics, if you go back 10 years ago, maybe even more, analytics was something that showed up at the beginning of the process. Oh, here's the smattering of data about this customer and how they might interact with the product. Sales rep is supposed to internalize that, and then they're off and running. Now, data has this opportunity to reintroduce itself constantly. There's always new data flowing in. There's always updating taking place. There's always fresh information to go grab because everybody's out there in public. There's somewhere in the world of the internet where AI can grab that information and say, hey, this is a piece of information that may be relevant to how this sale can progress further. And it's only in the sharing of that accountability through sales and marketing that that data becomes relevant to the process. So I have an expectation of salespeople that they stay up to date on everything that's coming in. I have an expectation of the generation of the data, whether it's through AI, manual levers, or other tools that are sitting out there. For example, the way that you pile analytics into the process. I have an expectation that the marketing team is not stopping at lead generation, that there's more to that. And as those things come together, they can meet at stage 0, at stage 4, at stage 9. They can continue to converge. And that's fresh. That's something that has changed, I think, over the course, especially over the last 5 years. But it's changing, it feels like almost daily now, trying to keep up with this flood of information that can come in. And how do you pick it apart and make sure that you're using the information wisely? But everybody's got to stay in touch with that. And if you can do that, pipeline moves faster, it gets bigger, share of wallet capture gets greater. You're addressing the entire TAM because you know more about what's going on inside the customer environment, and you know what more is going on with the people that you're interacting with. And all of those things are meaningful.
Absolutely. You were hitting on some awesome points there. And I feel like the handoff that existed when we were only focused on leads made it problematic to better align because it was kind of throwing MQLs over the fence, hope they become SQLs. Right. Go close them, champ. Like that was the level of involvement and alignment that we had. But now, as we focus more on accounts and buying groups and the collection of all that data, how do you think that's helping sales and marketing to better align?
Well, it's interesting. This transition that's happening and what you're talking about it's connected to the transition that's happening in the world of operations, where we don't just talk about sales ops now, we talk about rev ops. And that connectivity is creating a better environment for dialogue. It's creating better collaboration opportunities where people can come together and share in the ownership and accountability for a metric. It's creating better metrics. The idea of doing predictive analysis on a forecast, look, that's been around for a long time. And people have, sort of used spreadsheets to try and get at that information. Well, now you can drive predictive analytics against things, not just for the purpose of driving forecast alignment for the outcome, but also for driving forecast and pipeline alignment for stage to stage, and utilizing that information to create that better world where we're all in it together. This is a chance for teams that are not connected today to get better connected. And it's a chance for teams that are well connected today to become more effective. And so if we can lift that efficacy level across these organizations, everybody wins. There should be no more finger pointing. And that has been a mission that I've been on in these organizations that I've been a part of, is to stop finger pointing. Look, we're in this together. If you're viewing marketing as the enemy, if you're saying, again, back to the lead suck or the sales rep sucks, that's not the right approach to take. The approach to take is, what are we going to do to get better? Sometimes it is the people. Don't get me wrong, it happens. But there's almost always a process out there that you can help enable people to get better. You don't have to cut bait. You can manage people up, not out. But doing that with data, armed with all of this intelligence that we have out there, that's a massive win for everybody.
Yeah, that's great. I was going to ask any other advice you have on better connecting sales and marketing, which there may be other things you'll add. But one thing came to mind with what you were just describing. We recently had a very significant renewal for us. I mean, it was a big revenue item, but it was that pure collaboration and the fun and the energy that you were talking about. We had all the data. We knew what was going on. They were an existing customer, but we activated that in a different way. I mean, it was the sales rep, the CSM, and I we took the team to dinner and we hung out and we talked. And then the next day they had set time to record some videos that they needed for their internal usage for a big all hands, 180,000 employees. So I was in their studio for 2 hours. And then the very next day, the sales rep got the signed paperwork for the renewal. So quite literally, it was dinner on site, just helping and talking shop. And then the rep was amazing at what they did. They felt the love, the support. We heard them. And then you get the deal closed. And as a marketer, for anyone listening, there's no better feeling as a marketer to have, even if it's a very tiny role, but to have a role in turning something into revenue and that feeling, that adrenaline hit. And that's what it should feel like when we work together. So if there's any other advice or like, hey, go do this that you could share with a marketer or a seller listening about pulling them together, I'd love for you to tackle that.
Oh, thanks. So great question, great topic. You're nailing it with the idea of a couple things. One is that collaboration effort. And it's not just about the sales rep. It's not just about marketing. It also is about the CSM. It's about the other people that are engaged in the deal and bringing them into the decision process about what do we need to go do next. The second thing that you hit on that I really love is that you have a partnership with the customer. And it's not a selling partnership. It sounds like you had an opportunity to educate an organization and getting in front of them and being a true partner in their success. And doing so, I know it's not always altruistic, so I want to be careful about that, but there's a symbiotic nature to those kind of relationships that can be meaningful. The whole idea is to make sure that you and the customer are sitting on one side of the table and the opportunity, the problem, the sale, it's sitting on the other side. And you're trying to view it together and come to a conclusion about what's the right thing to go do. And in some cases in organizations, you brought up the CSM, what an incredibly valuable role to have sitting inside of that process. And some CSMs do renewals and some don't. It depends on the org that you're a part of. But one of the orgs we did, we took what might have been a CSM / contracting admin kind of role, and we converted it to a role that was titled the strategic relationship rep. And we did that because we wanted the customer to feel the right thing. We also wanted the person in that role to feel the right thing. They were a part of the overall health of the customer strategy, and they were integrated into the process. One of the other things that I would help guide people to is about engagement in parts of the business that maybe they're not used to having this collaborative effort in. So one of the examples is that I am a fan of making sure that marketing is sitting inside of forecast meetings, that it's not just a sales only exercise, so that when we're trying to derive what's our weekly, monthly, quarterly forecast, how are we looking at pipeline, whether it's on a leader, geography, segment, deal, rep level, whatever that might be inside that dialogue, that there's integration of the marketing, of the RevOps team. Everybody should be a part of that because we all should be viewing the same data. We all should be viewing it, at least in theory, through the same lens. And we all have an opportunity to impact and take that number and do something better with it. The only way to hit those kind of aspirational targets, and other than maybe luck, is to make sure that you've got great people doing great things and they're doing them together. And so the guidance that I tend to give, and it's the same thing I did in that last talk that I did, it is all about creating that vision of partnership. And if you can get that to be solidified, then these meetings that you're talking about, when they happen, it's not news. It's the way you do business. It's who you are. It becomes cultural. And if it becomes part of culture, things are on fire at that point. That's when you know you've hit success, that this is who we are. So I get pretty fired up about that.
Oh, yeah, me too. I had a Slack message pop up. I forgot to kill my notifications. It was from a seller. Hey, I saw your LinkedIn post. Great job. Great job on that. I mean, that's the give and take, right? We want that feeling. So great guidance there. I know that everyone's going to get a ton of value from this. As we come in the home stretch of our time together, we have a couple consistent questions we like to ask. The first we call good reads. Is there a book, blog, newsletter, or podcast that you'd recommend to our listeners?
Oh, first, thanks for asking that question. Look, I'm going to be so kind of 1980s about this for a second. The book that I tend to live by is the simplest book ever. It's the 1 Minute Manager. And I think that it has opportunity to show up in a variety of different relationships. And so it's all about goal setting and how to praise people and how to reprimand people. But at the end of the day, it's about how you build a coaching relationship. And there should be the opportunity to cross-pollinate coaching. It's not just about whether I'm doing this with an employee on my team, although I tend to phrase things as I work for them, not the other way around. It's about having that kind of trusted, credible relationship with people in the organization. That's what I take out of it. I know there's like 9 follow-on books to that, but that one baseline book really jumps out at me. There is a host of information sitting out there on the internet. I tend to, in being candid, I click around a lot. I have joined a couple of different collective groups that have been really helpful because I get to hear many different voices of whether it's customers or partners or operations folks or marketing folks or other CROs sitting out there. There's a great opportunity to do that, but I'm really simplistic about those things. The other book that I read that I really got a lot out of was this Atomic Habits book. And, while I'm not going to sit here and spout off, oh, here's my one key takeaway, I think it's a good read. And I think that everybody gets something different out of it. And that's been really helpful to me. How about you, by the way? What are your favorite books or podcasts?
Yeah, I was actually going to confess that I have a tab open with 1 Minute Manager. I was going to buy that for my team. No exaggeration. If I could share my screen on a podcast, I would. But it's been an open tab, and I have the Slack approval of how to expense it with the L&D budget. Yeah, I mean, that was one I think we had talked about, and it came up again. So I need to add that one. I mean, a couple that I still have on my desk. One is Everybody Writes by Ann Handley. I have, I think, 4 copies of that. I feel like every time I go to an event, it's one of the giveaways. It's an amazing book, but it's creating that culture of sharing content and sharing your experiences and that everyone's a writer. So that's one that stays top of mind for me. But we'll definitely add both of those to our list. One last question. Well, we have 2. Lightning round, about 30 seconds each. The first, any good people in B2B that inspire you that you recommend we bring on the show?
Look, I've been inspired by a lot of leaders in my career. I've been lucky to work with, for, around terrific people. Look, one of my favorite folks out there is Mark Anderson. Mark was my leader at Palo Alto Networks for a handful of years. He spent a lot of time over at Alteryx. He's at Cloudflare now. Look, this guy is a cultural leader. He's a visionary. His core is helping businesses grow. He's somebody that has consistently jumped out at me. When I take a look at other people, by the way, I'm hopefully not going to offend people by not listing them here. And so there's a risk that I have sitting inside of this. I just had this partnership with this guy named Russ Reeder over the course of the last few years over at Netrix. He was on the board there as a CEO there. When I take a look at the values and the philosophies and the culture that he brings to organizations, it's been really meaningful for me to grow that relationship with him. He's somebody that I would highly recommend to the process. By the way, I have a list of like 20 others. And so for those that I didn't mention, I'm sorry.
Hey, you can send me the list. We'll still work on those too. Thanks so much. We have one final question. How can people get in touch with you after the podcast?
So first of all, the easiest way is LinkedIn. I tend to be on there on a daily basis. You brought it up before. As a matter of fact, I'm going to add one other piece back to the other conversation. One of the signs that sales and marketing is working well together is that they are reposting and resharing the work that they're each doing because they see value in doing so. So let me pause there for a second on that, but we can leave that behind. But LinkedIn is the easiest way to get in touch. We do have a website out there. It's chconsultingllc.net. That's maybe the most unsexiest website name ever. But so LinkedIn works great, and it's easy to find me that way. Thanks for asking that question.
You're welcome. Joshua, thanks so much for your time. This is great.
I really appreciate you having me on, and thanks for what you do. What your organization does adds so much value into the process, and you getting up there and teaching others about what your company does, getting a chance to be in front of customers and prospects and share that knowledge and that opportunity with them, that's really powerful. So I'm really appreciative of you. Thank you.
You're very welcome. We appreciate you too. Well, thanks again. Thanks everyone for listening.
Thanks for joining us for On Base. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to share, rate, review, and subscribe on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. This show is brought to you by Demandbase, the only account-based experience platform built for sales and marketing alignment.